They say some moments haunt you forever, sticking like shadows, silent but always there. It's been 2 years since that day, 2 years since everything changed. It was supposed to be simple. A beach trip with my son Leonard. My husband Phoenix couldn't come. He never could. Work always came first and I had grown used to that, used to being alone. But that day didn't feel normal. Not then and not now. We spread out the towels, the sun was warm, maybe too warm. I lay down, finally feeling free from the world's noise, and asked Leonard to help me put some oil on my back. I didn't think twice about it. He's my son, my boy, why would I? At first it was nothing, just his hands helping me. But then I felt it. I felt him linger lower and lower. And I didn't stop him. Why didn't I stop him? You think you know yourself, think you know your family, but there's always a moment, one moment that can unravel everything. For me it happened that day on that beach and I've never been the same. Phoenix and I had been married for over 15 years. If you asked anyone who knew us, they'd say we were the perfect couple. A nice house, good kids, and a steady life. But you don't see the cracks until you're inside the walls. You don't feel the emptiness unless you're the one living it. 4 years, Phoenix's job was his world. He was always working late nights, weekends, holidays. I used to tell myself that he did it for us, that the overtime and dedication were for the life he was building for our family. But after so long, that story starts to fall apart. What good is a home if no one is ever in it? I became invisible to him. When he came home, he barely looked at me. He stopped asking how I felt, what I wanted, what I needed. We spoke in short sentences, mostly about bills, groceries, and the kids. He loved Leonard and his little sister, I say, but even with them, his presence was like a shadow, there but not really. I used to sit across the table from him, wondering if he even saw me anymore. That morning, I remember standing in the kitchen as Phoenix hurried out the door. He grabbed his briefcase, kissed I say on the head, and glanced at me just once. Sorry, Freya, I can't make it today. Something came up at work. I didn't even argue. I just nodded like I always did, my throat tight. I told myself it was fine. Leonard and I could go on our own. Leonard was 16 back then, tall, lanky, with the same brown eyes as his father, but with a softer face. He didn't say much, not even when I told him it would just be the two of us. I think he'd grown used to his dad bailing too. He just shrugged, grabbed the bags, and followed me to the car. I watched him in the passenger seat on the way there, earbuds in, staring out the window like teenagers always do. I couldn't help but smile. He was growing up so fast, and sometimes I wondered if I'd blink and lose him too. The drive to the beach felt endless. My mind wandered, as it always did, to Phoenix. I thought about all the things we used to do together. Movie nights, long walks, trips to nowhere just for the fun of it. I thought about the way he used to touch me, the way his eyes would light up when he saw me. I hadn't felt that in years. I hadn't felt anything. I was so tired of being invisible. We finally arrived, and Leonard helped me carry the bags to a quiet spot near the water. I laid out the towels while he set up the umbrella. I don't know why I suddenly felt the need to talk to him. Maybe it was because he was the only one there. Or maybe I just needed someone to hear me. It's nice to get out, don't you think? I said, trying to sound cheerful. He just nodded, pushing his hair back with his hand. Yeah, Mom. It's nice. I laid down on the towel, feeling the sun's heat soak into my skin. I didn't move for a while. I just let myself go still, like I was trying to let the weight of the last few years lift off me, even if just for an hour. But then I remembered the oil. I sat up and turned to Leonard. Can you help me put this on my back? I asked. I can't reach it myself. He looked at me for a second, almost hesitant, before taking the bottle from my hand. I laid back down, faced the towel, and waited. The first touch was gentle, careful. His hands were unsure, like he didn't want to hurt me. I smiled to myself because it reminded me of when he was little, when he used to hold my hand to cross the street. His hands had been so small back then. You can press a little harder. I said it, my voice muffled. It's okay. He listened, and his hands grew firmer as he rubbed the oil across my shoulders and down my back. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the warmth, the rhythm of his touch. For a moment I let myself enjoy it. It had been so long since anyone had touched me, and that thought hit me harder than I wanted to admit. But then I felt his hands move lower. Slowly, carefully, they moved down the curve of my back. My breath caught in my throat, and I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. My mind raced, but I stayed silent. I told myself it was fine, that he was just helping, that I was imagining it. But I wasn't. His hand stopped for a moment near the edge of where my towel ended. I could feel his hesitation, I could feel my own, and instead of stopping him I said it. It's okay, you can rub there too. The words hung in the air like something poisonous, and the moment they left my mouth, I knew I couldn't take them back. Leonard didn't say anything, and he didn't stop. I squeezed my eyes shut and felt his hands on me, lower than they should have been. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I wanted to move, to sit up, to tell him to stop, but I didn't. I couldn't. I let it happen. Even now I don't know why. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe I was too desperate to feel wanted even if it was wrong. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore. That day on the beach, something inside me broke, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the way, if you've made it this far into the story, thank you for sticking with me. I know it's not an easy thing to hear, and I appreciate you listening. If you're finding this video interesting or think there's someone who could relate to what I'm sharing, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing stories like this and makes me feel like I'm not alone out here. Alright, let's get back to the story. After that day on the beach, something shifted. I couldn't ignore it. What I felt, what I saw, and how Leonard looked at me afterward. It wasn't just a lingering gaze or a fleeting moment, it was constant. Every time I caught his eye, there was something different in him. Something I didn't want to name but couldn't unsee. I tried to bury it. When we got back home that evening, I did everything I could to act normal. I made dinner, asked Leonard about school, folded laundry late into the night, my hands trembling the whole time. I kept replaying everything that happened. His hands, the way he lingered, the tension I felt in my own body. I hated myself for it. And I hated him for making me feel this way about my own son. Phoenix didn't notice a thing. He came home late as usual, his tie loose and his face tired. He kissed my cheek out of habit, just a ghost of what it used to be. Long day? I asked, hoping for some kind of conversation. He grunted and nodded, already halfway to the living room. It was always like this. His presence felt like an afterthought, and I felt invisible again. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Phoenix snored softly beside me. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about Leonard, about his hands, about his gaze. I knew it wasn't right. I knew I should stop it, whatever it was, before it went any further. But there was another part of me, something dark, something lonely, that wanted to hold on to it, that craved the attention, the touch, the feeling of being seen. Days passed, and Leonard didn't say anything. But his silence was louder than words. He didn't avoid me, not exactly. Instead, it was like he stayed closer. I'd catch him watching me when I cooked, when I cleaned, when I sat alone on the couch at night. And I let it happen. I didn't stop him. I didn't stop myself. Then the next weekend came. It was hot again, and the house felt stifling. Phoenix was away, working a last-minute shift, leaving Leonard and me alone just like before. I asked him if he wanted to go back to the beach, just the two of us. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought being outside would help clear my mind. Maybe I wanted to test myself to see if I could push it all away. The drive was quiet this time. Leonard didn't wear his earbuds. He just sat there, staring out the window, his knee bouncing restlessly. I wanted to say something, anything to break the silence, but every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck in my throat. When we got to the beach, it was almost empty. I remember how blue the water looked, how the wind felt on my face. I spread out the towels again just like before, and Leonard helped me set everything up. This time I didn't ask him to rub oil on my back. I couldn't. Instead, I lay there with my eyes closed, pretending everything was fine. But even with my eyes shut, I could feel his gaze. I could feel him watching me. The real breaking point came that afternoon. We decided to rinse off in the beach showers before heading home. It was supposed to be quick, just to wash the sand off our skin, but then something happened that I still can't explain. When we reached the showers, Leonard stepped in first, letting the water run down his back. I stood off to the side, watching him for a moment before stepping in too. I don't know what came over me, but I peeled off my outer clothes and stood next to him. The water was cool against my skin. Leonard looked at me, startled. I don't know if it was surprise, confusion, or something else entirely, but he didn't say a word. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "You should take off your shorts too." You need to rinse properly. I don't know why I said it. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could be in control, that I could stop it. Or maybe I was testing him, testing myself. He hesitated for a second, then did as I said, sliding off his shorts. And there we were, together, alone, the water pouring over us, washing everything away except what we both felt. I turned my back to him and softly asked, "Help me with my back." And he did. His hands were careful again, just like before, but there was no mistaking the tension. I felt it in him. I felt it in me. When he touched my waist, I froze. The air seemed to thicken around us, the sound of the water drowning out everything else. I could have walked away. I could have stopped it. But instead I leaned back, closer to him. I took his hands and guided them to my chest, and when I did, he didn't pull away. What happened next I can't explain. I won't explain. It was a moment, a blur of need, loneliness, and something else I don't want to name. It wasn't soft and it wasn't slow. It was desperate, passionate, wrong in every way. But I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. And when it was over, we just stood there, the water still pouring down on us, washing away the evidence but not the truth. He held me then, held me like no one had in years. And I let him. Afterward, I let him go. We didn't speak. We dried off, packed our things, and walked back to the car in silence. I watched Leonard out of the corner of my eye. His face flushed, his movements stiff. I knew I had ruined everything. I knew we had crossed a line that could never be undone. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt alive. The drive home was quiet at first. The car felt too small, too heavy, like the very air was pressing down on us. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I could still feel him, Leonard, his hands, his body, the weight of everything we had just done. I couldn't stop myself from stealing glances at him in the passenger seat. He sat stiffly, staring out the window, his face flushed, his jaw tight. Then out of nowhere he spoke. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost uncertain. I didn't look at him, I couldn't, but I heard him. What just happened back there? My heart skipped a beat. For a moment I thought about pretending I hadn't heard him, about brushing it off, changing the subject. But there was no point in pretending anymore. Not after what we'd done. I took a shaky breath and answered, "I don't know." It was the truth, or at least the closest thing to it. I didn't know what had happened or why. All I knew was that everything had changed. We didn't talk again until we pulled into the driveway. I turned off the car, but neither of us moved. Leonard finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that scared me. It wasn't confusion or guilt or even shame. It was longing. "How long have you felt this way?" he asked. His words sent chills through me because I had been asking myself the same question. I looked at him then, and it was like something inside me broke. "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe longer than I want to admit. We were both quiet after that, just sitting there in the dark. I thought that would be it, that we'd go inside, try to forget it all and pretend nothing had happened. But Leonard had other ideas. Before I could open the door, he leaned over and kissed me. At first it was soft, hesitant, like he was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I let him kiss me and I kissed him back. And then I lost control. I don't know if it was the loneliness, the years of neglect, or the way Leonard looked at me, like no one had in so long, but I let it happen. Right there, outside our house, Leonard pulled me into him, his hands moving over me like they belonged there. I felt alive. I felt wanted. I felt seen for the first time in years. I didn't care about anything else. I don't know how long we stayed like that, tangled up in each other, but eventually we moved inside. I don't remember much about the walk to the door, just the feeling of his hand in mine, the silence between us buzzing like electricity. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. Once we were inside, everything escalated like we had been holding back for too long and the dam had finally burst. The next few days were a blur. Leonard stayed close to me, always finding reasons to brush against me or look at me when no one else was watching. I told myself to stop, to pull away, to end whatever this was. But every time I looked at him, I saw the same loneliness I felt. It was like we were mirrors reflecting back the same need, the same emptiness, and I couldn't say no. I didn't want to. At night, I would lie in bed next to Phoenix, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing. I'd think about Leonard in the next room, the way his hands felt, the way he made me feel alive again. And then I'd close my eyes, guilt curling up in my chest like a snake. I knew it couldn't last. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. The tension between us grew stronger every day until it finally exploded. It was late one evening. Phoenix was at work again, Isa was asleep, and Leonard and I were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes, trying to keep my mind off everything, when I felt him behind me. I turned around and there he was, looking at me the same way he did on the beach. "Leonard," I said softly, trying to warn him, but he didn't stop. He stepped closer, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. "Mom," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to his room, to leave me alone, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at him and said the one thing I shouldn't have: "I can't stop either." And that was the moment everything fell apart. Leonard kissed me again, harder this time, desperate, and I kissed him back. I didn't care that it was wrong. I didn't care about Phoenix or Aya, or the life we'd built. The only thing I cared about was him. Leonard, my son, the only person who made me feel like I mattered since that day on the beach. Since then, things haven't returned to normal. In fact, I'm not sure they ever will. Leonard and I crossed a line, one that cannot be erased, no matter how hard I try to convince myself otherwise. What started as a moment has turned into something I can't control. The guilt is there, heavy, constant, but it doesn't stop me. And that's what scares me the most. I look at my husband, Phoenix, and my daughter, Aya, every day and wonder how they don't see it. How they don't notice the cracks spreading through our family. Maybe they're too caught up in their own lives to see me slipping. Or maybe I've just gotten better at hiding it. But deep down, I know this can't last forever. Secrets have a way of coming out. And when they do, the fallout will destroy everything we've built. I've tried to stop. I've told myself over and over again that this is wrong, that Leonard deserves better, that I deserve better. But every time he touches me, every time he looks at me like I'm the only person in the world, I lose myself. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years, maybe ever. And that's the truth I have to live with. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can fix it. That's why I'm sharing my story with you. Maybe someone out there has an answer, something I haven't thought of. Maybe you can help me find a way out of this mess I've created before it's too late. So please, if you have advice, if you've been in a situation like this or know someone who has, I want to hear from you. And if nothing else, let this be a warning. Loneliness can push you to places you never thought you'd go. Don't let yourself get lost like I did. Don't let your world fall apart before you realize what's happening. Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts. Like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more content. I need to know I'm not alone. Sometimes the greatest betrayals aren't the ones we commit against others, but the ones we commit against ourselves.